Okay, so we're not doing a lot of background, but just tell me what time it is now, Penny.
It's 6:32 a.m.
Inspiration struck. So
That's
right
it?
Here. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, when did I announce the live stream? It was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Two weeks ago. Every day since then, I've gotten up.
Yep.
Early.
Yeah.
I've worked at my computer.
Yes.
I've revisited and or further culled or curated the existing 101 Ideas archive or compendium. Mm-hmm. And like right down to,
that's a lot of paper.
Handwritten, like right down to scanning every handwritten page and operating AI to transcribe the pages.
Yes.
And getting the transcription and pulling from that, right, to inform what am I going to talk about on and that's the issue is, what am I going to talk about on the 4th?
Yes.
And when I say what am I going to talk about on the 4th, the issue is
coffee.
Coffee. And when I say what I'm going to talk about on the 4th, the issue is at 12 a.m. And then I hear Brian in my head. But you just have to have, I hear Mommy too, like you have to have an outline. And when I think about the outline, right, the issue for me is, even like for me, a blank page has always been...
It's intimidating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what the last 6 years has been for me is it has opened up a world of dictated writing. Like writing with...
Just the AI facilitated?
No, not even that.
Okay.
It's my speaking what I want to say.
Yeah.
And having having like a bit of an interpreter to put my words together the way I said them, but maybe filling in, you know, like if it's as I call it, if I had another hour to unpack this, tell me right back to me what I said, and then using that as the basis for
like
some aspect of the 101 Idea script. Yeah. The issue, though, is I am unclear in this day and age how do you know when you have the tangible written word? Do you know what I'm saying? Because even then, what I've just written is still caught in a thread.
Yeah.
And that thread is made up of, you know, turns, right? And
it's all being mediated.
And it's still all being and when it's being mediated, that means that there's a lot that I'm saying to myself, well, that's not right, but for now it's okay, right? But I'm not actually copying and pasting it and putting it somewhere that I can read from or work from or edit from. And then I tell myself, well, I'll do that closer to the date, right?
Yeah.
And now here's the day before. And have I done that? No, because you know why? Because, and this is what I should, so I knew that I should have not only exported my ChatGPT, like requested my export, but also I should have deleted my account.
Isn't your ChatGPT export like 5,000 pages
It's
long?
longer than that now.
Oh my gosh.
It's longer than that now. But meaning, my thinking was, okay, request the export,
Yeah.
download the export, delete my ChatGPT account, so that I could restart or delete all the conversation history.
Start fresh.
So that I could start fresh. And starting fresh would mean that I don't have, when I'm searching for, say, what I did the week that we were talking about, the World Wars narratives, right? And how that narrative, there was something about I don't know if it was, it wasn't only the Jewish diaspora, but we were talking about different diasporic, I hear that conversation as different diasporic pipelines, right, into the United States. And also whatever you want to call it, the export of the United States into other countries, and how, talking to you will reveal how certain narratives took hold in our country. One of the ones that we talked about was even this whole never again language that we have here in the United States too. And you were explaining that part of that was because it wasn't until the end of the war, when we went into Germany, that we saw the scale of the devastation, like the murder, right? The murder and the scale of the lives lost.
How industrialized it was.
Yes, how industrialized it was. Right. Thank you. How industrialized it was. Which is to say, again, there was a what do you call those conveyor belts? The line, assembly line. Yeah,
disassembly.
Yes, right. But it was it was like that. Like, first you go here, then you go here, then you go here, and then this person does that. Correct?
Yes.
Right. And what was that? Well, if you were going to explain all those steps, what were the steps? And when you say industrialized, unpack what you mean by that.
Well,
taking a detour.
Okay. So, you think about the Industrial Revolution, right?
Right.
And that's when production of, back in those days was tangible goods mostly, right?
Right.
But it was...
Wait, hold on one sec. I want to open voice memos real quick.
Okay.
And we're going to see, actually, we're going to open voice memos, and we're also going to open Otter. Okay. One moment.
Sure.
I need some doing stuff. I'm doing stuff. Doing stuff. I'm doing stuff. Music. Continue.
Okay.
Wait.
Let me know when.
Yep, sure will. Brian is the best person when it comes to hold that thought. He will legit hold that thought more than anybody.
For days.
Yeah.
He's like, what the hell are you talking about?
And
I'll just pick up the thread.
And if I'll be like,
later.
so Brian, and you'd be like, so, remember, as I was saying.
It's just funny because I lose the thread so easily in the moment.
True story. If it's not hey, fact. Mm-hmm.
This is the mind of ADHD.
Okay, go ahead. Yep. And we both have ADHD. And...
I don't know how hyperactive I am.
We both have ADD, and they're compatible, but they're completely divergent. They're different. I think we both have manifest differently. Okay, so please explain what you mean, and repeat what we're saying again.
So I had mentioned that in during the Holocaust in World War II, kind of the extermination of Jewish people and other people considered undesirable to the Nazis, was industrialized. And so Penny wanted me to talk about what I meant by industrialized.
Right. And I wanted him to talk about that because it relates back to my thinking around preparing for tomorrow and this 24-hour.
We gotta prepare like the Nazis.
And this 24-hour script, especially when you're thinking about AI and human production. the more you become an iterative user of the technology, the more you do think of the world as inputs and outputs and process and protocol.
I've got some interesting ideas now that you're saying this.
And so process and protocol. So it's interesting to me because part of 101 Ideas is really looking at the process, the protocol, the inputs, the outputs of past U.S. events and getting in our minds that we're at this opportune time right now to leverage that thinking and see things objectively, more objectively, as a series of inputs and outputs that we want or don't want. It's a binary decision, which is everything in computational thinking. It's binary. Everything has to break down to a binary choice. So either we want or don't want. So that the rhetoric behind what we say we want or what we say we don't want can take a second place to the actual meaning, right, of what we do and do not want as a country.
Okay. So you got to give me about 5 to 10 uninterrupted minutes. Here,
gotcha.
Okay?
I'll shut up. Let me do my, I'm gonna set my, yes, go.
Okay. So you think about the process of industrialization, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about the 19th century, mostly in the Western world. And what you had was this transformation of production of back then it was tangible goods mostly. Basically you mechanized it, you regularized it, but most of all you systematized it.
Mm-hmm.
So prior to that, people were making stuff in workshops. You had kind of an artisan-based economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had the creation of the factory,
Mm-hmm.
where Penny earlier was talking about conveyor belts. Things going down conveyor belts, and everything was standardized. So things were all the same shape. They used the same parts, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Which allows the third part, which is systemization. So you create your system for producing, whatever widget you're making,
Mm-hmm.
and it works the same every time. And it's just died. And it's predictable. And so once it's predictable like that, you are able to make better predictions about your output, what your future profits are going to be, what the future looks like. And so you are able to marshal these systems toward whatever goal that you want it to be. In capitalism, typically it was just profitability. You look at this model with World War II, and and I'm going to just do a little aside for a second.
Please take your time.
They talk about in the 20th century about kind of the creation of modernity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of World War II was kind of the culmination of modernity. So, we live in a postmodern world now. But it was this idea that you could apply these principles of industrialization in a way that kind of really shaped history. The currents of history, the trend of which way history was going. And there were people that had debates about how this was going. The Marxists on the one side, and the capitalists on the other side, and so forth. The Germans, especially the Nazis, they had a very, very defined idea of the direction that they wanted history to go in. Mm-hmm. With Germany and the quote-unquote Aryan race coming out on top. Mm-hmm. And one other thing that we know about the Germans, it's a stereotype about them, mm-hmm. is that they are incredibly systematic. Mm-hmm. They're known for their engineering, and they are ruthless in mm-hmm. their efficiency. Mm-hmm. And what the Nazis did is that, and they're not the first to have done this. Mm. you know, the British did it in their empire. You know, they created these systems of exploitation, systems of repression, systems of killing, extermination. You know, we did it in the U.S. too with the American Indians. But what we saw in Nazi Germany was kind of the ultimate outcome of this trend towards systemization of these kinds of things, where they literally created basically what were factories for killing people. And you know, during World War II, the people in the West, Western Europe, and the United States, you know, people who were fighting in the wars or who were at the highest levels of government might have known that this was going on in Germany, at least to an extent. But you know, the people on the ground, even the people in Germany, were unaware to the extent which this had been systematized. And you know, at the end of the war, and you know, the Americans and the Allied powers were very savvy about this. They publicized this because they knew it would horrify people, right? And so one of the things. Wait,
the people where were savvy?
The military leadership of the victorious Allies, right? And one of the things they actually did is they brought German citizens and they forced them to tour the camps and they said, "Look at what you did." and you know, you look at what happened to German culture, and that was like, it was transformative. They came face to face with what was going on, and they turned their back on it. I mean, to the extent that they could.
That was going to say, because you're saying they were unaware, so did they really turn their back? That's the narrative that we heard.
And it's the narrative they tell themselves. You know, they fancy themselves to be kind of like the most enlightened society now.
So they're saying that they, yes, and knowing that they actively turn their back, they now pay more attention. That's what they're saying? They've learned. Okay, keep going.
Now, you know, it's funny because, you know, after World War II, there was this kind of political turn away from this idea of ruthless systemization. But I think you look at the late 20th into the early 21st century, and with the information revolution, we're seeing similar kinds of trends. And I also think we're seeing, in some corners, a similar kind of averse reaction to it. There are people who really don't like AI. I sometimes find myself among them.
Yeah,
you know, it's like a visceral reaction to it. But you know, you look at what it's doing. It's, you know, it's making business more efficient. It's making production now, both in terms of information products and tangible products. You know, people are saying, well, 20 years from now, there are going to be no factory workers because it's just going to be robots controlled by AI. You know, what are the humans going to do? And, you know, it's a very dehumanizing prospect. And, you know, I think if we go back to the earlier days of information technology and the internet, and people were talking about, well, you know, the internet and all these technologies are going to be these incredible tools for enabling human creativity. I think that's also true, and I think that's still true, but I think that we don't necessarily have a handle on that and what that's going to look like. And in the meantime, the people who are kind of you know, clear-eyed, you know, steely-eyed about what they're going to do with AI, they've already seized a lot of the control over it. You know, Elon Musk has his own AI, you know, Grok. Elon Musk, whatever else you say about him and whatever else you think about his vision of the world, he's very good at making money. He's very good at at generating profits. And, Elon Musk isn't the only one. There are a million Elon Musks out there. He is just the richest of them. And they are out there thinking about just how they're going to monetize this, how they're going to make money off of it. And I don't know how much room there is in that for kind of AI as a potentially liberating force or a force for creativity. I know, so I look at Penny and my wife and her relationship with AI over the past half decade, and I think it's certainly spurred a ton of creativity, but I also see there is a crisis because there's so much creativity, she doesn't necessarily know what to do with it. Right? Now, the last thing I want to see is Penny become the steely-eyed person who just has one goal, that is making money, because I think that would be at the expense of what are some of the most beautiful and valuable aspects of what she gets out of AI. So we had a discussion this morning, and Penny said to me, well, I'm not making money off this AI thing yet. And I said, well, money can't be the only goal. It can be a goal, but I think if it becomes the only goal, then I think she loses what it is that sets her apart. Her penniness. Okay, that's what I have to say on this subject.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, so keep going. We were talking.
So what do you have to say about this?
Well, no, I still want you still unpacking the mechanized thing, weren't you?
Okay, so let's.
Well, because you were saying. Can I ask a question first, though? So you said something about systematized is number 3.
Yeah.
Is standardized 1 or 2? Is mechanized 1 or 2? What were the 3 standard? It was
mechanized, standardized, systematized.
Mechanized. Okay, which is 1? Mechanized is 1, right?
Yeah.
Step 1. Then standardized is 2.
Yeah.
And then systematized is 3, right?
Well.
And how was, so that means and together those are industrialized. Like that's what.
Yeah, that was kind of the process.
That was the process of industrialization. So, you were saying, so walk us through now how the eradication or the murder of Jews or non-Aryan Germans was industrialized during World War II, and that timeline of industrialization, and do you and whether or not the culmination of modernity point, you think that was something that had already been heralded by the Germans themselves who are at the upper echelons of the military, or do you think that it truly was in assessing the damage and taking that shame spiral tour after the end of World War II that the almost appreciation for the industrialization of that process became more, really took hold? Well,
I think something important to look at with Germany entering World War II is they were still a very young country. We talk about America as a young country, but Germany, they were only around as a unitary country from like the late 1800s, right? So the United States had like 100 years on them. And
wait, from what year they were only around? What?
I forget.
Don't look it up.
I forget exactly. It was the late 1800s.
Okay,
I forget the exact year. But when I guess Prussia and the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, they merged and formed Germany, right? And I think there's a lot of ambition that comes with that, verging on hubris. But I also think it directly fed this idea of we are the modern efficient. We talked about Nietzsche the other day, and the Superman, the Ubermensch, right? And they said we willed ourselves into being a modern country, arguably at the vanguard of modern, like the world's most modern, most prosperous, richest country. Then they lost World War I, and then they put themselves on top again, and they're just like, nothing can stop us, right? And it's funny because they did that in the interwar period by breaking the rules. They were like, we are going to break the rules of we were just going to ignore. They had all these treaty obligations for World War I. They're just like, we're just, sound familiar? This sounds like the the .com and the AI mind. Move fast and break things.
That now has become the political rote, behavior, right? And which is because of the influence of the .com era, the onset of the tech economy.
These existing guardrails don't do anything except hold us back, so we're just going to ignore them, right?
Said by a small minority of people who were in the position. And even thinking about the technology part, right? A small minority of people, which isn't about race exactly as much as it's about like who is listened to and who has been actively reverse engineering an outcome and able to articulate it. Go ahead.
The other thing with the kind of interwar history is that in some senses Germany had some legitimate gripes in that the conditions imposed upon them after World War I were exceptionally punitive, right? They were designed, they really were designed to hold Germany back and hold their economy back. The rest of Europe really saw them as a threat, right? Now, they swung wildly the other way, and this
World War II, you're saying,
and this handed Hitler and the Nazis, it handed them the opening for the narrative to blame it on the Jews, right? They're just like, this is the Jews.
This being what? What are you talking about?
Germany's shame in Germany being held back, it's the Jews.
Germany's shame in like the conditions being imposed on it.
They literally said we were stabbed in the back by the Jews.
In World War I.
Yeah.
And how was that narrative even plausible? Like, explain to me what, because there was a seed of something that they used for
there was hundreds of years of pre-existing anti-Semitism, right?
Right, but what happened in World War I? Like, what events happened in World War I what part of the World War I loss were they talking about?
The entire thing. Basically, so this is a society where, 300 years before, if you had a plague in the village, you were just like, well, the Jews poisoned the well. They were conditioned.
Right. Okay, keep going.
They were really conditioned to blame this one group. So it fit this pre-existing. You had this disaster for Germany where they lost World War I and they were, essentially disgraced and bankrupted as a country. You had this pre-existing narrative that when bad things happen to Germans, it's the Jews' fault. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to make the leap, right? So and that resonated very powerfully with people, right? And returning to this topic of kind of this process of industrialization, right? You look at the beginning of World War II, the Nazis weren't killing Jews, at least not directly. They were putting them in ghettos, and they were like, we're going to deport the Jewish people. But they had other ambitions at the same time. We're gonna conquer Poland. We're gonna rule most of Europe. But not all of this had taken shape. And you look at industrialized killing over the course of the war, and it becomes more and more formalized, more and more systematized. Once they start, once the violence begins in earnest, first it's things like, kind of the pogrom model where
Mm-hmm.
where it's just, okay, we're just gonna go in and start being, we're gonna beat the crap out of Jewish
Mm-hmm.
people. We're gonna maybe shoot some.
Mm-hmm.
Then they started being rounded up into concentration camps,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they're like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? But the concentration camps, they weren't gassing people and stuff like that at first. Usually what they do is they put people in front of a ditch and shoot them in the back of the head. And, eventually, later in the war, I forget, it might have been like as late as 42 is when, they're like, we need the final solution. We're doing this all the way. We're putting all the tools, all of German ingenuity at our disposal to get rid of Jewish people. And that's when you started having things like gas chambers and ovens, right? Where they're just like, we are going full on, industrialization is what made Germany great again. And we are just going to go whole hog on it. And, they had this giant bureaucratic apparatus for carrying this out. They created, like, all of these positions. And, the thing is, one of the remarkable things about the Holocaust is that they kept meticulous records. And at the end of the war, they tried to destroy a lot of this stuff. You hear these stories of the Allies are moving into concentration camp XYZ, and they're furiously trying to burn papers. Because they realized that the very systematization of that allowed them to carry out the extermination was also the most damning evidence against them. Right?
Do we have any of that documentation?
Yeah, I mean, you can go down the Jewish Museum here in Philadelphia or the Holocaust Museum in D.C.
And you can see the
you
evidence.
You can see examples of it. Yeah.
And so, what did it? Have you seen examples of it? What does it look like? Does it
when
look
I was
like
in high school,
machine? Does it look like arrows? Does it look like?
I went with my high school on the European trip, and we visited some of the camps in Germany, and we visited Nuremberg where they had the big rallies and everything, and so I saw some of this stuff up close back then.
Can you live stream from a museum?
Well, I don't know, maybe, but I remember people were getting in trouble because they were live streaming and doing selfies at like Auschwitz, and it was like, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're like, selfies, like throw the peace sign or whatever.
What Jewish museum is this here?
It's right across the street from Independence Hall.
What's it called?
I think it's called like the American Jewish Museum or something like that. I went there with Jocelyn. I forget it.
The Weitzman Museum.
That's what it is? Okay.
Weitzman National Museum of American Jewish History.
Okay. Yeah.
I've never been there.
It's a good museum. It's really big. Might be, I don't know what it would be like going there at this particular moment in history. There's definitely a lot of very very vocal kind of pro-Israel content there. Even on the outside of the museum, there's like a giant banner, "We stand with Israel," and so obviously then there's also some pushback. Due to the controversy of what's going on in Gaza. So, when I went there with Jocelyn, it wasn't, it wasn't before the October 7th stuff, but it was before, like, the huge escalation of the war in Gaza. So, there was some stuff, but I imagine now it's probably a lot more visible and louder. Yeah.
I wonder if they would let me. Are they open today?
Probably.
Okay, so where did we leave off with the mechanization. So where did we? I needed to give you 5 to 10 minutes. It's been 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's been more than that.
And so now talk me through. Just tell me, what was the industrialization of World War II and Nazi Germany? What was that process? What was it? What did it do? And what was the predictable output?
Well,
and how had it been perfected, that process? Over time?
So when we talk about industrialization during World War II, it wasn't just Germany, right? It was a wartime economy around the world. It transformed a lot of different places, including the United. We talk about the American century or half century. The American economy was built on increased industrialization of the American economy for the war effort. Building factories to build tanks and planes, industrializing agriculture to feed the army, to feed the population, while a large chunk of the working age men were overseas. Increasing mine, like all kinds of stuff, right? So this is a trend. The broader trend was happening around the world. You go out to Polynesia, Guam, wherever, right? And their economies completely changed. And there are anthropological studies where they're just looking at food consumption patterns in Polynesia, like places like Samoa. And we think of Samoans stereotypically as they're heavier people, right? And prior to World War II, you didn't see a lot of fat Samoans because they were fishermen and farmers, and they were eating fish, and they're eating stuff they grew. And in World War II, they got put to work in factories and military bases and started eating a ton of canned food. Spam, that's why Spam is so popular in the Pacific. Is from the U.S. military presence in World War II. Yeah.
Damn. Daddy talks about Guam all the time. I don't know. He always talked about Guam. Go ahead.
So, and these were places that there was little to no industrialization prior to World War II. So, it really, really shook up the world in that sense. And, Germany, like I said, they were always at the forefront, and they were always at the forefront of industrializing and kind of technologizing aspects of their economy at that time in history. And they even just look at the way they waged war absent the Holocaust. It was like, okay, well, how did Germany conquer France so quickly? Well, France was still fighting with World War I tactics, and Germany had the Blitzkrieg, the Lightning War, where they had all of these mechanized units and these really fast tanks and vehicles, and they're just like, we're applying the new technology to this problem to solve it more efficiently. And in World War I, you had this battlefront that would move over the course of months, a few yards, right? The whole trench warfare and the stalemate. And then at the beginning of World War II, they conquered France in a matter of days, just ran right across it. And they had this very deeply ingrained ideology that technology was going to push Germany forward and push them to go. It was very successful in a lot of ways.
It's Peter Thiel.
But even at the end of World War II, when they were losing, even then you hear these stories about Hitler.
Germany. I thought he was from
You hear these stories about Hitler and looking for wonder weapons, like these miraculous high-tech weapons that were going to turn the course of the war and win the war for Germany. And they were trying to develop an atomic bomb. The irony is that we were able to develop it before they did.
So can you walk me through step by step what the Nazis' industrialized killing process actually looked like once it was fully mechanized, standardized, and systematized?
So they had, they had squads that went around rounding up Jews in their occupied territories, right?
And this was a repeatable. The squads was a repeatable process.
Yeah.
Got it.
They had the SS. They had these. Basically they were squads that their job was to round up Jews, right? Then they would bring them to the rail car, and they had the whole railway network that had essentially depots at the camps built to transport. They built out a transportation network to ship, Jewish and other people, the other people they were exterminating, ship their bodies, ship them bodily to the camps. In the camps, they were put to work. And, basically worked until you were no longer useful. And, at the end, they were gassing them. And so it's like, okay, you got to go into the shower because we're going to delouse you.
And what does delouse mean?
Get rid of lice,
And was this process built end to end?
Yes.
Up front?
No, it was gradually built out because, like I said earlier on, they were shooting people and dumping their bodies in ditches, right?
And why was that deemed not sustainable?
Takes a lot of bullets. How do you kill 6 million? That's a lot of shooting.
And so, who would have been responsible for engineering this as a iterative process? Would that have been Hitler himself, or would that have been someone in his administration?
It was all delegated, but they had. It's funny because
what was their org chart?
I can't go through the whole org chart, but you look at some of these positions, titles in German, and it's like in German they string words together, right? So they're like Obergruppenführer or something, and they had this like super defined hierarchy from top to bottom, and things were just delegated down the chain. And the idea of having a final solution, they came up with that at the top, and they're like, okay, people below us, figure out how we're going to do this. Do this, do this, do this, do this. It was bureaucracy. But it was extremely well organized and very efficient. Right? And they would do things like cost-benefit analysis. They're like, well, we spent so many Reichsmarks on bullets. How can we kill more efficiently? The same way that you'd run a factory, right?
That's how mommy raised me. Cost-benefit analysis.
Yes.
And Richard, you're saying yes because you know mommy?
No, but I mean, this is like
return on investment.
This is like a fundamental principle of industrial capitalism.
This is negatively reverse engineering. I call it negatively. So I talk about positively reverse engineering.
Yeah.
I talked about it yesterday in 101. So to me, this is negatively reverse engineering, meaning you are reverse engineering someone else's negative outcome. But to them, it was a positive outcome for themselves.
But they also relied on the systemization to remove the human nature aspect from it. Maybe I don't want to be putting my neighbor in an oven. Maybe it feels bad to shoot someone in the back of the head. But even in the modern American army, they're constantly trying to figure out how to get people to pull the trigger. There are these studies that show that like a large proportion of people, even in the American army, which like is the most willing to kill of basically any army, they still have a large proportion of people that will not pull the trigger. And they account for that.
Of all of the armies, ours is the most likely to kill.
Like of all the professional armies, like ours, because they have psychologists studying this. They're just like, how do we train people to make them willing to kill someone they don't know? It's contrary to the nature of most people.
Okay, so you're saying, so we were talking about the org chart, and you were saying that they basically did cost-benefit analysis, and you were saying, what you were inferring was that, or what you were implying was that the human nature piece, like that part of that process that they were engineering, was designed
taking human nature
was
as
taking
an equation.
taking human nature as an equation. So they designed it so that man was a more predictable input in itself when it came to achieving the goals of the overall process.
Have you ever heard of the Nuremberg defense?
I have, but tell me what it is.
So they had the Nuremberg war crimes trials after World War II, and a number of the defendants, their defense was, I was just following orders. And ultimately, the Nuremberg tribunal said that defense is no defense.
But who was the Nuremberg tribunal?
Yeah, it was composed of, like military justices, basically from the victorious Allies.
But that was because that was because the victorious Allies had already determined that no matter what they said, that they were going to, that what they did was wrong, and the putting them on trial was part of the whole look at this, like it's part of the shame spiral.
Although they let a lot of people off, because they also, they were pragmatists, and they're like, someone's got to run Germany after the war, right? So, they looked for people who were kind of the worst offenders, whose crimes were of the worst magnitude, and those were the ones, that eventually ended up on the gallows or like in prison for life, right?
But again, if you think about it, that's still collusion. That's still a conspiratorial way to handle justice. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, there are always other considerations.
Well, right, and so I'm saying that to say that when we think about justice and we think about legal consequences, we really idealize it, because, and to the extent that the Nazis engineered, right, that horrendous outcome, the Allies engineered the outcome of who would be guilty and who would not be guilty, and this, so that, like, this is what we're going to do. I mean,
it was a foregone conclusion that the people at the top were going to be hanging.
And I think about the Supreme Court. And the podcast segment that I was listening to yesterday about the executive powers to fire whichever version of that worked out in the president's favor, and that John Roberts wrote the opinion, and the guest was saying, right, well, this is something that he's believed since working in Reagan's administration, and he has long been working towards this. And I think about Jim Bopp, right, who was the name I finally got to, who has been reverse engineering a pro-life victory that would upend Roe v. Wade, and that became Dobbs. I think about, again, Thurgood Marshall. That, to me, was more of a positive reverse engineering, because it was intended to bring true emancipation and actual liberty to a subset of American people. And I think that there's no way to talk about these things without understanding what we were talking about the other day. There is no good guy, there is no bad guy, there is no townspeople, there's always all three. And to me, every actor at some point is playing all three roles. So even in fixing a shameful act, the making it a shame spiral has been so unhelpful. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is we have these popular narratives
Yeah.
that ignore all the behind the scenes stuff
Right.
that's going on.
Right.
So back when I was in law school at Georgetown Law,
Mm-hmm.
and this is directly on point with this decision.
Mm-hmm.
So
Executive.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So what this is about whether the president has the power to fire the heads of administrative agencies, right?
This is when you were in Georgetown, or the most recent one?
That's what this case
That's
is
what
about,
this
right?
case, the most recent.
So
that
I
was
took,
just decided.
so, and you know, this is all rooted in administrative law, which goes back to the Administrative Procedures Act, which was passed, I believe, by FDR, which establishes the procedures for setting up and appointing, heads of administrative agencies and other officers of administrative agencies. And so, the idea with administrative law is that Congress is saying, we can't do everything ourselves. We're going to let the executive set up these agencies and delegate some power to them. And so there's always been this tension as to whether, like, is this, how rooted is this power in congressional prerogative or executive prerogative? And up until now, the idea was that, like, the president just can't fire these people willy-nilly because Congress, this is congressional power at its base.
Well, right, and it sounds
Okay.
like was Congress just being too lazy to do their, because like we can't do all of this ourselves. Sounds like a Congress that didn't want to legislate or act.
I mean, the administrative state is enormous, and it's what
Right,
it's what
it's
the
about-
right wingers call the deep
The
state.
deep state,
these
right, and
days,
so
right?
the administrative state is the
mean, it's-
regulations part of the legislation.
Yeah, yes, and it's literally, it's a question of what they call in legal circles administrability. There's just too much for Congress to handle on its own, right? So you got to have some other apparatus to handle this stuff.
And handle means make it operational.
Create the rules,
Yes,
have
okay.
Okay, so
Systematize, mechanize,
so
whatever.
so I was at Georgetown Law and I took this course in administrative law. My professor was the late Judge Larry Silberman, who was one of the experts in administrative law. He was appointed by Reagan, right? And he came down on the executive side. This is a guy that that Roberts leaned heavily upon, right? And the interesting thing is that he knew administrative law inside and out. He was a fantastic professor of it.
And what's his name?
Lawrence Silberman, Silberman, I believe. And so, but he was philosophically against the idea of the administrative state, and for for the position that ultimately led to this decision under the Roberts Court, right? And so
he would have been John Roberts' mentor.
They were like the same circles, right?
Okay.
I don't know how directly they worked together, but like he was definitely informed. Like this was a guy who literally wrote the book on the subject, right? And during the class, he's like, well, if this eventually gets overturned, this is going to be the reasoning.
And this was the actual reasoning.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, they had this case. So this was like 13 years ago that I was taking this course, right? And they had the reasoning worked out then. They just didn't have the justices on the court, right?
What was
and
the
they didn't have the on-point case.
And this was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. You need the case. You need the perfect, like the perfect plaintiff or the perfect whatever.
And and what it ultimately comes down to is what is your view of kind of the boundaries of executive authority under the Constitution, right? And what are your ideas about delegability and how much power can be retained once you delegate something? And there are other cases that aren't even necessarily administrative cases that implicate this as well. Kind of like if you remember, there was the idea of the legislative veto that under the Clinton administration, and they wrote laws as such that they're like, well, if the president doesn't perform this way, then Congress can veto the law.
Mm-hmm.
And that was thrown out on the idea that they're like, well, the Constitution, the way it defines the veto is that only the president has the power to veto something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you know, everything with Congress has to follow, you know, kind of the vote, present it to the president,
Mm-hmm.
and then the president can veto it or not. And if you want to then undo the law, it has to be through separate legislation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there are conceptually similar ideas about like delegation under
Oh, he's a judge now?
Silberman. He's dead.
Oh. Administrative, which last year awarded Judge Silberman.
Yes, this was 2022. He died a few years ago. Yeah.
The Supreme Court versus the administrative state.
There you go.
Lawrence
Yeah.
H. Silberman,
Yeah.
chair. Supreme Court ruled that defer to regulators. Congress, faithful execution, and Judge Silberman's. Okay, this
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
Leviathan what's Leviathan? An interpretive revolution.
The Hobbes, I think. You know, Leviathan, right?
What's Hobbes?
You know, the political philosopher, Enlightenment political philosopher. Hobbes wrote Leviathan, right? It was Locke. One of them wrote it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Got it. So can you, Leviathan or the matter
Yeah.
form, and power of a commonwealth,
Yeah.
ecclesiastical and civil.
Yeah.
What is all of that? Argues that for a social contract and an absolute sovereign to prevent the chaos of the state of nature, where
Yes.
life is a war of
Yeah.
against all,
Yeah.
a war of all
Yeah.
against all. So the administrative state
Yes. So
would be go ahead.
So this supports the idea of a powerful executive.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a foundation, but that's the one executive,
Yeah.
not executive. It's a foundational text in political philosophy proposing that people surrender some freedoms for security
To a sovereign. Yeah.
and is named after the biblical sea monster
Yeah.
to represent the right. So that's what's happened with tech, honestly. And now it's formalized in the presidency of Donald Trump. I think it was formalized by the parties before Donald Trump, but I think he has exceeded the party power, and now go ahead.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the debate here is that it's like how much, say, do the people retain, and you know, in our system that's manifested through Congress, because Congress are the
right.
Yeah.
But the congressional process, the congressional electoral
versus the
process is
executive.
completely captured
Oh, yeah.
and completely industrialized.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about
Yeah,
industrialized,
this is all theoretical.
So right, and I think we take for granted, we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah.
That how industrialized our political system is, and our vote, to me, has been completely undermined.
Yeah.
Even that, like, if you think about from input to output, like, we can't even trace the true input of a candidate into the political system, even if you say it, like whatever it is objectively,
Yeah.
right? It still leads to, but where? A but that if you keep asking, right, goes to a small group of, like, even Graham Plattner. There was a small group of people who were like, we need to find a charismatic Democratic candidate who can compete against whoever.
Yeah.
And how they receive submissions, which is part of one of my 101 ideas is people need to do more American Idol style talent shows. Like, we need to do that across industries because people are doing it in the background, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
They accepted submissions. And so much so that you hear an interview, here I go with Ezra Klein, he plays a part of an interview where they were like, well, we got a lot of, he might have said we had a lot of submissions. But then I'm thinking, well, where was that call? Where was that open call? And, you know, he just stood out. He was a this, so stood out from whom? And even to the extent that we can find that information online and we can fill out something. There is something to be said for, is there really ever an unknown quantity? Even looking at Zoran Mamdani, his Mira Nair being his mother is a
he comes
big
from wealth and power.
deal. Like
his dad is a super influential political scientist.
We
too.
don't talk about that enough. Like Zoran Mondani is not one of us. He is not.
No,
he is not.
Sure,
he is elite.
Yeah.
And he is whiting all over the place, which is what being elite like, because now he is throwing his weight behind those Democratic Socialist candidates to upend races across New York. And Lord knows I believe that he thinks he's doing it for the right reasons, because whiting all over the place is not a thing that people do consciously. It is not. Like, it is a thing that happens when you don't even have the ability to read the room and your place in it. This is when the idea of we are all the heroes of our own story, that takes hold to such a degree where any action you make is subjecting others to being the townspeople or to being the villain. And that's what's happening right now to me with the Zoran Mamdani thing. But can we go, let's finish this industrialized process of killing Jews. And you were saying...
where do you want to go with it?
Well, you were saying the rail, right down to, solving for human nature. Maybe it doesn't feel good to shoot other people, shoot your neighbors. And so you were saying they did the rail, and that was because of blank. Like, just walk me through all of the steps in that industrialized process that at the end of World War II, Americans, when going into Germany, would have been brought face to face with, because what I'm hearing you say is like, and the process of it all would have been so obvious to the Americans going into Germany.
Well, when they went into the camps, and my grandpa went into the camps. He wouldn't talk about this stuff. But
he fought in World War II.
Yeah, he was a medic in Europe in World War II. And it's interesting because he was an Austrian American Jew. He got his medical degree in Vienna before the war. And
how had he been spared? Oh, because he
before
left.
The
he
war.
fled he fled.
Well,
Germany.
he was from the U.S. But his background, he spoke German, whatever, and he went to medical school over there because that's where his family was from. And
but when they went into
Vienna,
the camps,
and he wouldn't say much about it, but he was just like, yeah, it's as awful as they say. But granted, he died when he was a teenager, and probably if I had known him as an adult, he might have opened up more. But anyway, they went into these camps, especially the big ones where the stuff was really systematized and formalized. And you see a railway with the boxcars, that people were rounded up into. You get to the camp, you see the barracks. You see the people who are still alive there, who are emaciated, and who describe the forced labor. You go into these shower buildings, and you see the shower heads are hooked up to these dispensers of Zyklon B, which was a poison gas. Then you see the crematoria. It didn't take much to put two and two together about what was going on. And yes, there were survivors who were just like, yeah, this is what they were doing. They were putting us in ovens. And, in some of these camps, you had the retreating Nazis trying to destroy evidence. So burning records, trying to burn down, maybe some of the buildings that were most incriminating, etc. But they weren't able to destroy everything.
Right.
And then you find things like a giant vat full of gold fillings that they pulled out of people's mouths that they had gassed for the gold, some of the stuff that gets a lot of the press, like, lampshades made out of human skin, that stuff was not actually all that prevalent. But they were taking fillings, Or you find
lampshade made of what now?
Human skin, But, you are finding thousands and thousands of shoes way more shoes than there are people in the camp, you know, purses, whatever, your personal possessions. And like I said, gold fillings. And, you know, you can't account for how many there are based on how many people are in the camp. You know, even if they would have had just like, okay, it's a labor camp and there's a lot of mortality. Still, it's like, there's just way too many. You know?
So meaning like all of these, where are the souls who belong, like the actual souls who belong to these shoes?
And you know,
they've been exterminated.
And
they didn't just
the
expire.
Germans were efficient. They weren't going to throw this stuff out. Yeah, it's like, hey, you know, we're at war. We're going to use this stuff.
This is interesting, and this is also part of the right to be forgotten, right to, like, your right to die, right to be forgotten online campaign, because I'm thinking...
Well, it's the opposite. It's like people are like, we have a right to be remembered, not be erased.
Right, but also people have a right to be forgotten. I think that that's a choice that we should be able to make, and also, too, we should be able to make that choice with informed consent, with the informed consent of, and what remains of my digital footprint, right, is mine. I don't care where it is, because even looking at the training of large language models, and I know it's not accurate to say trained by all the information on the internet. Like, people say that's not an accurate statement. Okay, fine. But let's just say colloquially that that's a version of how we are meant to picture it. So much of the information on, like, how much of the existing information online, or even on the Wayback Machine since the beginning of the internet, how much of that information would have been populated by those who are no longer with us, or at least those who, if they haven't expired, they've at least their roles, whatever role that they were participating in the internet in, right, that role has expired. They've moved on to, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, I'm just thinking of the shoes thing. Like, it's just cluttered with so many either shoes of dead people or shoes that nobody wears anymore. Let me shut up. Yeah.
So in another life, I used to be an archaeologist. And, you know, you look at the arc of human history. And most people pass through it without leaving much of a trace behind, right? Or, you know, not remembered as individuals. And, you know, a lot of archaeologists, you know, they say, well, you know, we're restoring voices to people of the past. You know, in like the 90s, early 2000, 2010, like a lot of archaeology was all about like resistance archaeology. And, you know, it was very Marxist, and they're like, you know, we are restoring voices to people who were oppressed by history. The dominant narratives erase them. And I get that on a certain level. But on another level, it's like, you know, who, you know, do these people want? Yeah,
and you're the arbiter, and you're doing another form of oppression. You're being the arbiter of what they would or would not have wanted based on your own belief.
It's funny because, you know, in the field that I work in, historical archaeology, like a lot of, or worked in, I should say, like a lot of, like a huge source of information is digging in privies. And if you don't know what a privy is, it's an outhouse. It's a toilet. And I remember there were some sites out west, and these are in areas that would have been like religiously Mormon, you know, Utah, whatever. And you dig up these privies, and you find alcohol bottles, or you find bottles of patent medicine that contain a lot of opium and cocaine. And what was happening is these people were going out to the outhouse to consume this stuff because they didn't want people to know that they were consuming it. And then...
Wait, you find what there?
The bottles of...
Okay.
Of, you know, these... Because, you know, they were drinking, or they were addicted to drugs, or whatever, right? And it was something that wouldn't be socially acceptable. And they didn't want anyone knowing about this. Which is why they threw the stuff in the privy, right? Now, on the one hand, it is, I mean, it does tell us something interesting about society and people's behavior. It's like, okay, you know, they claim that they were, you know, a dry society, or they claim that they weren't doing this. In reality, they were. You know, from an anthropological perspective, that's pretty interesting. But, you know, revealing that about the individuals who did that is betraying a secret of theirs, you know? And you know, there are people, well, these people deserve to be known in kind of their full capacity. It's like, well, you're saying that. That's not what they wanted. They didn't want to be known that way, you know? These are literally their most private moments, you know? And, or, you know, even you look at some of the controversy with, like, Native Americans and graves, and they're just like, these people would not have wanted their bodies dug up. They believe that they returned to the earth never to be seen again. Of course, that's an argument being made by people now, too. But the upshot of all of this is that we can't say, but we are taking it upon ourselves to speak for people, speak for other people.
You're making me think about the 1619 Project. I'm actually doing a little... and Nicole Hannah-Jones. Will you explain the 1619 Project? But we like just
so this, you know,
anecdotally.
this. So the 1619 Project was released in 1919, right?
2019.
Or sorry, 2019. The 400th anniversary, and of 1619 when the first African slaves in North America, in the U.S. arrived. What would become the U.S. So this was in Virginia, you know, Jamestown. And that was an interesting story too, because what had happened is that the British, who were in control, they captured a Spanish ship that had slaves on it, black slaves, because you know the Spanish were already in the slavery business, and they were brought to the Virginia colony, and they didn't really know what to do with them. We have indentured servants. We don't have slavery. And, you know, there was a debate over it at the time. And eventually they settled on, yeah, we're going to enslave black people too.
Wait, say that one more time.
Eventually they settled on...
But tell me the whole sequence again.
You know, they were captured. These were people that were enslaved by the Spanish, and the Spanish ship was captured by the English. And
who were those people? Were those people not black people?
They were black. They were black people from Africa. So, you know, the Spanish were already using black slaves in the Americas.
Yes.
They had first enslaved natives, and then they got decimated by introduced disease, and then they started importing slaves from Africa.
Right. And you're saying it was interesting because how...
The British, there was no provision in British law for how to handle slaves.
Did they not have slaves in Britain? But when they invaded the colonies...
They did have indentured servants, too, and so there was some debate, and they were like, well, these people
But they needed, so since that was already established...
But what they settled on was that it wasn't that these people are black, it was that these people are heathens. They're not Christian. And the Bible says they may be enslaved, right? And so, you know, originally slavery was rooted in religious difference. And then after the first generation, you know, basically they were forced to convert to Christianity, and all of a sudden they had all these black Christians.
Better Christians than you, better Christians.
And then they're like, well, we have to come up with another rationale.
Reason. And what was that
rationale? And then
rationale?
it became race. That was kind of the creation of race in the North American sense.
So you're saying race did not play a role in it until the 1700s. You're saying all of the
legally it didn't.
But don't you think that anecdotally, this is like the same question I was asking about the Jewish narrative.
Yeah, I mean, people, yes. race did exist in that people were like they're blackamoors
But
or whatever.
were black people were there not black people in Britain at the time? I guess
there were.
Okay, but
You know,
they had
people got around
officially
more than you
immigrated,
think,
right?
But it was much more of like a curiosity, right? It wasn't speaking about like industrialization, or back then it would be like mercantilization of like, you know, we're gonna start importing people to be slaves, you know. But you know, if you lived in one of the big cities in England in the 1600s, you probably would have seen black people. Or at, you know, at the very least darker skinned people, right? Maybe from like North Africa or whatever. Because people did travel, you know, sailors. That's who you probably would have seen, you know. Now, but yeah, you know, it was more like these people are exotic, right? And would you have had some prejudices against them? Yes.
So the 1619 project.
Okay, but back to the 1619 project.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I was going to read, but okay.
Yeah. So it was this attempt to kind of reassess the dominant narratives of American history in light of the fact that for the U.S. and for North America, race and the legacy of race has always defined our history. And we have, and I choose this particular word in all its depth of meaning. We have whitewashed history. We're still doing it. Look at what's going on at the president's house here in Philadelphia. You know, Trump they ordered them to remove all references to slavery.
The president's house?
It's a national park here in Philadelphia,
yes, that's right? Yes.
And they had some signage that talked about the history of slavery at the, you know, people who were enslaved by, you know, former presidents who lived there and, you know, and other people. And the Trump administration ordered the National Park Service to remove it because it was too negative.
And so, to me, the thing that I don't disagree with, but I want to reframe. So you said 1619 was an attempt to kind of reassess the dominant narratives of American history in light of the fact that the U.S. and for North America, race and the legacy of race has always defined our history. And when I think about the 1619 Project, created by Nicole Hannah-Jones, published by the New York Times in August 2019, was built around the 400th anniversary of the arrival of 20 and odd captive Africans at Point Comfort in the English colony of Virginia. More precisely, this was not the first arrival of enslaved Africans anywhere in North America, but it is treated as a founding moment in British mainland North America, the colonial line that becomes the United States. The captives had been taken from a Portuguese slave ship,
Portuguese, not Spanish,
by English privateers before being brought to Virginia. In the context of what we're talking about, the 1619 Project is not just history, it is an argument about narrative power. It says America usually tells the origin story through 1776, Liberty, Founding Fathers. The 1619 Project says that the story is incomplete unless slavery, black labor, anti-black law, capitalism, citizenship, and black freedom struggle are placed at the center of the national narrative. And I've always believed that while that's not wrong, anything that makes my stomach hurt, cramp, and it's a specific cramp on behalf of someone else. Like because you know, I always feel like I can hear what someone is thinking. I'm not saying it's true, you know, but I can hear what someone's thinking or how someone is likely to react to something. When the 1619 Project came out, my stomach hurt because I could hear someone saying, well, it's also not true to tell the story of America that way. And I believe that we fight over what is and isn't true in the wrong way in this country. Like, there is this sense of absolute truth. And part of why I appreciate this moment of having the computational power at our fingertips is because we have a non-cognitive thought partner, right, in technology that isn't addled with the human mindset that we are, with this need to reconcile for how you have always understood things and or how you have always wanted to understand things. What? Go ahead.
I've got a but, though.
Okay.
Or a what about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what about the fact, though, that these large language models incorporate the biases of the people whose material they're ingesting?
So really, whenever I'm talking about the computational power at our fingertips, I'm not calling it out. I'm really talking about the hour in there. It's the person. I believe that there are a subset of people, I think of them as dreamer doers. There are a subset of people for whom the existing narrative or the existing systemization of how narratives are put into the world has just felt deficient. And that person, with this computational power at their fingertips, is likely to do one of a few things. One, they're likely to exploit the computational power towards their belief in what the narrative should be. They're likely to obsess over the holes in the existing narrative and the contrarian story for every story, like having the contrarian output. There's a third rail, as I call it, that is it's a lot more dangerous because it threatens to make you sound and look, I'm going to say, like a fool, but it's unpredictable. And that is to treat everything as a binary what's that, proposition, right? As a binary proposition. So to me, the proposition when it comes to race in this country is not, was race a part of the American story or not? It is now, can we agree that race was a part of the American story? Yes or no? And I do believe that we have got to actually have that story, have that debate. And to me, like, how would we even mechanize that debate on the ballot? Because the way in which so there are people for whom race should not be an element, a variable. They believe that, and that's why they have, as the small subset of people, legal activists, they've been putting the Thurgood Marshall playbook or whatever the wiles of their legal imagination to work to reverse and or to further undermine what was already loophole-filled legal jargon of protections. If you're talking about the Voting Rights Act, if you're thinking about the equal employment, the equal employment laws that were literally only for, like, they were strongest, so to speak, for the federal government more than they were for private industry, right? And that's what removing DEI, that's what that means. And the thing is, if you listen to some of the stories of, like, that story about the black woman who, I forget which state she's in, but I think I sent you that article or that podcast. They had it on the New York Times, where she had this case against whatever the Attorney General's office was that she was working for, because she was experiencing unequal pay, and she had brought it up in all of the right ways, and they were just giving her a pretextual answer. And so she had a case before the Trump administration, and then once the Trump administration came in, and the actual DOJ and was gutted, and the office of the state, whoever the prosecutors would have been working on her behalf, right? They were all let go and or told to let her case go. Yeah. So to me, the binary proposition of having it in the conversation is us saying, one, there needs to be a campaign to say, hey, look, do we, like, some people, a large group of people need to say, I want to be a part of the machinery that truly encodes affirmative racial equality across case law, right? So that means you've got to look at you have to reverse in all of the loopholes. Like, look at why did we get so caught up in the DEI of the federal government? And we never talk about why is it that so few cases of racial discrimination, of gender discrimination, of discrimination are brought against employers, because there's manufactured consent that is so firmly rooted in the private industry. Whether you're signing the right, what do you give away your right to sue sometimes in an employment contract, and all of these things which may or may not hold up in court, but people are intimidated, employees are intimidated by their employer, or they are given a carrot of, like, saying getting $2,000 versus getting nothing, or paying for tons in legal fees if you were to try to sue us. So there is this manufactured consent that the entire country has handed over when it comes to racial equality. If a group of people, right, were to actively take up an actual affirmative consent, and if it were to be a diverse group of people, and if that diverse group of people weren't only good white people, because good white people, bless their hearts, and they aren't just white, right? Good white people have this way of doing what Brian was talking about with the whole resistance movement in archaeology, meaning you start settling scores. I'm not talking about settling a score. I'm talking about looking at some of the legislation that was passed as a result of the civil rights movement. But nobody from the civil rights movement was in the rooms when the legislation was written. And that stuff was mediated by deal makers who were like, well, I'll give you this if you don't do this. Well, we can just put it this way. Look, the thing that you're worried about, don't worry about it. We're going to write it this way. We're going to put this in there. Like, those things are all inputs that, to me, you can have a conversation with a large language model. I can literally take the transcript of what I just said, and there is an entity that has access to history, historical facts, and can help me stress test this idea. And the thing is, you could say, well, anybody can stress test any idea. Right, they can. But I know one thing. If more of us are stress testing more complicated ideas that aren't just all or nothing, and the all or nothing becomes, do we want to solve for race or not? That's the binary decision. And I believe that there's at least one generation of individuals. Sorry.
There's embedded in that, though, the assumption you can solve for race.
And then herein lies the rub. Because these machines also help you get past those type of philosophical questions. So in this moment, I would take the transcript and I would say, right, but what am I talking about? Because also words fail me right now. I think for me, I'm saying there's a binary decision of even, like, do we understand case law that informs and undergirds the human rights equality systems in this country? Yes or no? And I'm going to say for most people, it's no, even for the lawyers. You know what I mean? Like, everything is about edge cases, leading edge, you know, and there are always a small group of people who are devoted to identifying what are the constraints of this particular law. And I think I seek to reveal that those forces have always been at work on two opposing sides. And in fact, those opposing sides, they could be the binary decisions. But if more of us were contributing to how those sides were operating, even that would do more to mitigate what I see as the partisan divide that keeps us from actually making yes or no decisions together. You know what I'm saying? Like, that divide keeps us only making yes or no decisions in our own echo chamber, or not being a part of the decision at all and just watching other people make the decisions, and we're just kind of handing over our consent. But I got on a tangent there.
I think I need to stand up.
Okay, great. So
what time is it? Because
I don't know.
We're going to be doing 24 hours more of this.
Can you help wrap this up with what I just said, so that I don't feel like I said nothing? Can you do the thing that I was asking you about yesterday, which is like, oh, and remember to be gracious toward me when I talk? And how is that a good wrap up for what we just? How is what I said a good wrap up for what we were talking about initially?
I think what it does is it illustrates how many different levels that these debates and these processes are playing out on. Right.
And how can I speak more convincingly about the opportunity for a different posture towards large language models that might...
Specifically large language models?
Yeah, that might, because we're already using, like, everybody's using ChatGPT almost every day, or Gemini.
We are at a point where we are seeing a technology fundamentally transforming society. Mm-hmm. Probably on a way that is on par with the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. It can play out a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. I think that our discussion about, the Nazis and so forth, I think that shows both the power and danger of wedding yourself to a specific narrative and vision without being able to critically assess it. It can, what you are doing here is you're saying, well, 1619 Project, the race discourse in America.
We started here talking about the industrialization of the
the counter narrative to that.
Jews. Mm-hmm.
Those both, they've been meticulously sculpted.
Yes, they have.
Right?
Yes, they have.
And we as human beings have this tendency to glom onto the specific narrative and swallow it whole.
Right.
I mean, that's the basis of party politics in America.
Right. And this is why I'm always talking about the independent voter. And we really do have
the independent mind.
And the independent mind. We really do need the third rail for the independent mind, the independent voter. But how do you, what's the...
I think that what you're advocating is a very savvy way to approach these tools.
And what am I advocating? How would you
articulate it? In a way that questions the assumptions. And, it's interesting because you were talking about, well, there are these edge cases. But these edge cases, they're all channeled through our existing legal structures, through the Constitution, through our existing discourses. And although they might be edge cases, they're not fundamentally questioning
yes
a lot of the underlying
Yes,
assumptions.
yes, they are. They are just reverse engineering
Yes.
an opposite outcome or an inverse
One
outcome.
one other thing that I was thinking of a few minutes ago while you were talking,
Mm-hmm.
based upon what you're saying, is that if you look at our political discourses and our historical discourses, people have been hacking them forever, right?
Mm.
In one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for that crack into which you can
Christopher Rufo in Critical Race Theory. Yep.
insert yourself and manipulate the existing structures. One of the interesting things I've seen with AI is these talks by hackers, people who self-style themselves as hackers, say, how can we manipulate the behavior of the large language model? How can we manipulate what it thinks, what it says, what it outputs? And now you're also seeing the power structures behind them start to do the same thing, where it's like, Grok doesn't criticize Elon Musk anymore, right? Because the command came from on high. But there certainly are people that are exploring the possibilities of how you can manipulate these things in different ways. Now, what I would say is,
but they're doing it to wreak havoc. Yes, I was going to say with
one agenda or another.
It's like that chaos. What was that chaos theory? The
butterfly.
No, it was something chaos, something else. It's the Dungeon and Dragon.
Oh, the chaotic good and the
chaotic
evil.
Good and the chaotic evil. It was that. It's that guy talking about the chaotic good.
Some people just want to disrupt. Some people want to further a specific agenda.
What do you think I want?
I think that you want something in between, and I think it's very useful. Is that I think that you have more of the explorer's mindset.
I just want, if the disruption is what is chosen, I want this idea of majority rules to be more operative at different layers of life. Like, so if you expose at least that, like, hey, there's this group over here who want to disrupt, and there's another group over here that wants to further an agenda, here are the ways in which we can decide, like, hey, there are other options besides this disruption and this agenda.
Well, I think we have to stop fetishizing the disruption.
Yes.
And we also have to
stop villainizing the agenda,
well,
or
maybe
lionizing,
I think even more fundamentally that, we have to recognize
we just have to accept. And we have to accept that agenda is what makes the world, like, agendas have been operating since that's how we got here.
I think we have to be willing to put the work in to understand the nature of the agenda and how it's interacting with it.
And as a result of that, and through doing that, we arrive at a collective agenda, or at least more competitive collective agendas but that we can get behind. Because right now, the agendas are truly, they are developed and operationalized by such a small subset of individuals. And you're right. We do have to recognize it, because the more we recognize it, this power is at everybody's computational fingertips. And then at least the things that break through, there's more of an opportunity for the things that break through to be the things that really more humans can agree on. To me, that's what we have the opportunity to do, because it's the humans who are going to be putting into practice whatever it is that the different things that they're trying, as I have that song, put a little something in the world and see what it becomes, right? Like, that's how you can do these little seeds. And I believe that you can plant seeds of hope and faith, and that can also be practical. They can also be practical. And some of that looks at how has the current agenda been working, right? And also looking at like the founding of something, looking at the onset of something. That's why this moment is important. If you look at the founding of America, how has the agenda of America versus the birth of America, how have those two things differed? What have we been, and how has what we've been trying to reconcile at these generational handoff points, how has that created these systems of inheritance for us that are now just all have taken such a narrative foothold that it's made us inept at actually solving for the agenda itself.
Well, I have one other thing to
Yes,
add.
please, and I want to shut up.
I think that we have to recognize also some of the risks of destroying consensus, right?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that a lot of consensuses, they exist for a reason, and they reflect wisdom, the wisdom of the people who put the consensus together. I think that what we've seen and they might not be 100% right, and they should be challenged and critiqued, but I feel like a lot of the political operators and the people in public spheres over the past decade have become really adept at destroying consensus to push an agenda that places them in positions of political power, damn the consequences. So I am thinking about things like anti-vax, and I feel like the second Trump administration, especially, even more so than the first one,
because
is entirely built on
because
this.
it was industrialized. Like,
Yeah.
meaning we talked about Project 2025, but we don't talk about the actual industrialization that it was mapping.
Well, we say our institutions will protect us. They're not any. They are aiming. We're tearing it down just
but
because.
But then here's
it's
the thing, and weren't they? And the thing is, they're being torn down because the people who are tearing them down saw how their efforts or someone else's efforts to whom they were adjacent to intervene or even influence how the institution had been, quote, protecting us, right? And questioning whether or not the institution was protecting us, how they were defeated. It was always someone else's way or the highway. And these are, to me, the power struggles that we're playing out in the background, in the system of politics. That's the flip-flop of from one administration to the next, or what it looks like to have one party in control versus the other party in control. And Project 2025, to me, is the work of one person who was like, look, I just want to solve for everything all at once so that we don't have to do this piecemeal. What about this? What about this? Across all of these systems or sections of government that flood the zone. It's the flood the zone ideology. So I think I do understand, like, these systems were designed, quote, to protect us, but then there is flawed meaning, if any meaning at all, in a statement like that, because at what point do we say, and here's when it was? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, here's when it was and here's how it was. Just because something is funded in a particular way, does that mean that it was protecting us? I don't know. I don't even know that it's like what you were saying about the spam and the Samoans. You don't know that every improvement, right, is always really helping the human being to whom the improvement is being, on whom the improvement's being imposed.
I mean, you can completely deconstruct anything and say, well, nothing means anything.
Sure.
But, I think things like just saying, okay, we're no longer giving foreign aid to anyone.
Oh,
overnight.
well, yeah,
Like,
that's just a tantrum. Yeah, that's a tantrum that wasn't effective.
That's
right.
just creating chaos.
That's just creating chaos, 100%.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't need to have a conversation about how much foreign aid we give, and a conversation about why were we giving more foreign aid than other people, or we don't give, you know what I'm saying, or like whether or not how it contributes to our deficit.
But you don't give an agency that doesn't even exist legally, headed by a South African now trillionaire,
of course,
and a bunch of 20-year-olds,
right.
unlimited rate, just be like,
right.
destroy everything.
Right, 100%. Yeah.
That's not a conversation.
That's not a conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. And to me, the fact that those things happened, it's like, how did those things happen?
They just did it.
And also, what does it look like for us to solve for stopping people? Like, the fact that you can't sue, like, it takes so much to sue the government. You can't, like, and I think that we
Sovereign immunity.
Yeah, like, I think we all, collectively especially, have a case for, like, our interests not being, but you can't, as the American people, sue the government. That idea of the people versus is not a real thing.
So Hobbes with Leviathan, talking about people giving up power to the central, the sovereign in that, the executive, whatever. The other thing he talks about is that the remedy for that is when the sovereign isn't reflecting the will of the people, is you overthrow them.
Yes. And there's no.
So it's also revolutionary,
right? And
but that's why during the American Revolution, like, a lot of the revolutionaries were reading Hobbes, and they're just like, the king is no longer abiding by the contract.
And so this is also where we go with impeachment, but it's the 2/3, right? It's the 2/3 number that keeps it from being an ineffective, right, impeachment, why you can't actually overthrow or get someone removed from office. And to me, the entire industrialization of party politics has been to keep the American people from overthrowing the president.
Yeah.
It's like, that is why we have partisan politics, because people in power don't want the people to have the power to overthrow the government.
It doesn't have to be that way, and there are things that are in particular. Look at UK. They have recall elections. You can always get rid of the prime minister, yet they've been stable for hundreds of years as well. And they also have a lot of political parties.
And these are the things, and these are the things, again, large language model, computational power at our fingertips. These are things that you can consider, not just what-if experiments. So, for another segment, and why don't maybe this is how part of 101 Ideas will shape up. I'll take the transcript of this conversation, and how do you suggest I engineer an input-output thread with large language models?
You would know way better than I would, because I just don't work with them a ton.
But what would be a convincing way to take the conversation that we had today and represent it to you or to ourselves in a way that got us thinking about how we would apply some of these concepts to the current administration of our...
Just say, encapsulate the main themes of this, and analyze how these could be applied to our current political...
Okay.
I mean, also, remember to make your deck. You asked me to remind you.
Oh, yes, that's right. I got to make my deck. I have to make my presentation deck. Okay, and insert here presentation deck that will accommodate part of the day being playing old conversations, using the transcript of old conversations, live inputting the conversation into a large language model, and comparing it against other existing content in either my ChatGPT export or in the apps themselves, and together synthesizing those two, we'll just call them briefs for Brian. They're briefings for Brian. Briefings for Brian that
Box of briefs.
I will read to Brian live. And he is Brian is the person with whom I stress test everything, because he, as much as he loves me, he does not drink the Kool-Aid of myself that I drink of myself, which is not meant to sound like that self-reverential. But anyway, so we could try that. How does that sound? Would you be willing to sit through my reading you a Brian briefing?
Before or during the thing? I
don't know. Can we do one before with this? Can we do this one before? I just want to see how it works. Are we going to
record it, or?
Yeah.
Okay. I did want to go shopping today. So.
I know you do. Yes. But you also said that you would be available in whatever way I need you today, outside of going shopping.
We're going to need some food and stuff.
I know, but yes, right. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. And I might need your help in could we both access the same OBS panel?
From different computers?
From different computers?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'll look that up and see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We just decided to do this. We were having this conversation on the patio. And thank you. Thank you. I love you so much. You're so... Mwah. Wait, I want to touch your lips with my lips. Mwah. I love you.
Okay.
Bye.
Love you too.
Bye.
Okay. What time is it?